Hi, this is Manda and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I am doing a card challenge for a blog named Hero. This is a blog that focuses all on Hero Arts products, and this month it's about embossing. So here we go. Now I apologize, I do not have the stamping process for this beautiful flamingo here. This is using the color layering flamingos from Hero Arts, and it is a 3-stamp flamingo. It has 3 different stamps to make a layering. Right now I'm putting my sentiment on my paper, trying to get a placement of it. And I'm using Bristol Smooth cardstock because it is a watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to be watercoloring. So I am stamping my sentiment very lightly on my sheet, and it's very hard to see, but I used a very light ink, Barely Beige from Simon Says Stamp, and I put a mask down, just some sticky post-it tape, and stamped it again because I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to cut around this sentiment. And then when I put it back down on my paper, it will serve to cover up that spot because I'm going to use a big background stamp. And I don't want to cover the area where my sentiment will be because I want to be able to have a flat surface to stamp it on later. I use that negative space to get a nice placement for that mask. Cleaning up my stamp, putting it away. And now I'm going to get ready to stamp the background. What I did was I put some temporary adhesive on the back to make sure that it stuck to the back of my MISTI. I'm going to lay down this background stamp, and this is a really neat stamp, background stamp. It's the Circle Pattern Bold Prints background stamp from Hero Arts. And I'm going to use this as my background because I thought there were good spots to make a sun and waves or water in the sky. So I used my anti-static powder tool on all of my paper, brushed it on there, and I'm going to use my Versamark ink all over the stamp that down really well. And with these background stamps, you really have to put a lot of pressure on them just to make sure that you get good coverage all over your paper. And I'm actually going to stamp it down a second time, put lots of pressure down there. And I kind of tilted it that way I could get better visual of coverage about that sticky ink. And I'm going to use some white embossing powder, and I just grabbed a piece of scrap cardstock out of my recycling bin to use to collect all that embossing powder that I tap off. And I can just take that paper and funnel it right back into the container. And actually, I ended up having to go over a little part again because I smudged it with my finger. You can see right here I have to do that little part. But that mask there has covered that area so that when I remove the mask, as I have right here, there'll be a nice flat surface that I can later stamp my sentiment. So for watercoloring, I am using the Arteza watercolor brush pens. I haven't used them a whole lot. They kind of intimidate me, but I thought I should practice with them more, and I'm just doing very simple watercoloring here. I put direct to paper color with the pen, and then I'm just pulling it out with a water brush pen. And this brush is like a paintbrush. It's just filled with water, and you can squeeze out the amount that you need. I don't use it a whole lot. I don't know why I don't, because it is really handy. I just need some more watercolor practice. So, and it unfortunately with these Arteza pens, they work really well. I really don't have a comparison. I know there are other brands on the market, but these ones you get a nice color set for pretty inexpensive, and they work really well. as far as I can tell, because I don't have anything to compare them to. But anyways, I have my yellow here. So I picked one of these circles out to be the sun, and I did direct to paper, laid out some of that yellow, and then I'm just going to pull the color out with my water brush pen. I think I started talking about the fact that these Arteza pens, they don't have any sort of name for the color or number. So what I ended up doing was laying them all out in a rainbow color order that I thought was good for myself, and I put a little piece of purple tape on each one with a number, so that way when I put them back into my container, they're in like a order arrangement for me, so that I you know, have somewhat of an organizational process for them. So I pulled out a darker color and more of an orange to add a little bit darker of a color in the center, and then I'm using my water brush pen again to just pull that color out and desaturate it a little bit. Use my microfiber cloth to pick up some of the water. I didn't want to have too much water sitting on that surface of the paper because it'll buckle. It'll start buckling a lot. So at this point I decided to add some more color to my waves. I actually have the cloud sky area is a very light blue, but I wanted more of a contrast, so I laid some more color down with the same blue, and then I'm going to pull that out again and set that aside to dry. Now I am layering or stamping my hibiscus, my layering hibiscus from Hero Arts, and I put down a lot of leaves and then a few of the flowers, and there's a larger flower and a smaller flower. And the inks that I chose at first, I believe this is the Butter Bar from Hero Arts, the yellow, and then the pink is from Altenew. It is the pink diamond color. I don't have a whole lot of Hero Arts colors, so I ended up using more Altenew colors, and the Altenew colors are really nice because they come in like a set of monochromatic colors, so they're really easy for these stamp layering sets. For the second layer, I used Gina K Peach Bellini. I'm not sure if I'm happy with that, and as you can see, this stamp layering set isn't one of the easiest sets that I've worked with. You kind of really have to get your head over and just to make sure everything's lined up really well. This third layer here is kind of like wow in your face. I ended up using the Gina K Coral Reef, and I think it's a bit too much of a contrast. So what I wanted to do, because this is mostly an embossing challenge, was this third layer, I stamped it down with color, and then I used my anti-static powder tool, and then I'm going to stamp it with the Versamark and then use clear embossing powder on that last layer just to give it a little bit of more dimension. And I'm heat setting this, and this is actually a second panel that I did. The first panel I ended up using white embossing powder on accident, and it did not look good, so trust me on that. Here I don't have the coordinating dies for the set. I'm not even sure if they make coordinating dies, but it was pretty easy to cut them out by hand. The flowers, especially the leaves, were a little bit tricky, but I worked through it and got it done. And once I have all these cut out, I'm going to lay everything out on my background now that it's nice and dry. So my panel, I actually cut it. It's a little bigger than a standard size card because I wanted to get a good background, and I figure I can just cut it down later, which is what I'm doing here. And I'm just going to cut that down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm stamping my sentiment with the Altenew Ocean Waves color, and I went ahead and stamped that down 3 times just to get a good impression. And that masked area that I did is nice and flat and ready for that sentiment. I'm going to apply my anti-static powder, and then again use my Versamark to emboss clear embossing over that text, and that way that'll give it some nice dimension. And then that background will be ready to put my flamingo and all of my flowers on. So here I'm getting that ready. Gonna emboss that. And I have my flamingo. And I did the same thing with my flamingo, since it does take 3 layers for the flamingo, that top layer. And for the flamingo, I used the pink diamond, peach bellini, and coral reef on that. And then for the beak, I used charcoal soot from Altenew. And that last layer of the flamingo, I embossed it as well, just like I did with the flowers. And once I have them all laid out, I can start gluing everything down. And I'm just using foam tape and liquid glue. And at this point, I realized I forgot to glue the stamens on, and decided to use Nouveau drops. And once it dried, it did not look good. I did not like it, was not happy with it. So I ripped all the flowers off and all the leaves. And here is the final card, because I re-stamped everything with the layering set and made sure to stamp those stamens beforehand. And I like the way the card turned out much better. So thank you so much for stopping by, and we'll see you next time. Bye.